I watched Trump's meeting with the Australian Prime Minister today, so you don't have to, and here's my overview. The craziest thing he said is that Hamas has been in control of Palestine for 100 years. The election that they won that put them in power occurred in 2007, so not even 20 years. Let's get into the meat of it. They spoke for 35 minutes, and Trump somehow mentioned Biden 9 separate times in 35 minutes. That's a Biden more often than once every 4 minutes. So right at the beginning, Trump accuses some cameraman of running into a mirror that he says is 400 years old, and he just brought out from the vaults. I guess maybe it was around 150 years before the United States became a country, or he brought it over from someone brought it over from Europe or something. I don't know how we end up with a 400-year-old mirror, or why Trump feels it's important to put that out on display. Trump is talking about rare earth because Australia is one of the few places that mines and processes rare earth elements. And he says, we'll soon have so much rare earth that you won't know what to do with it. They'll be worth about $2. He doesn't know what rare earth elements are at all, and he's just comparing it to this gas price idea that he has of being under $2, which again is non-existent. The two of them sign a document that apparently is for some trade agreement, although none of that is explained, although the prime minister will say that it's an $8 billion pipeline, and then Trump says it's for rare earth. One of those can be true, the other one cannot be because they do not coincide with each other, but maybe the agreement covers a whole bunch of things, including rare earth and also this pipeline that they're being talked about. But again, I would have no idea because they didn't explain any of that before they just went ahead and signed it. Then they're talking about subs. I mean, this meeting is all over the place. He's going to go and ramble a lot, but they're talking about subs. And Trump says that there was an agreement in place that I guess Biden had put in place to sell Australia more military subs, but that nothing was ever done about it. And now we're apparently pumping submarines out at a faster rate than anyone's ever seen before. He says again, because he has no idea how tariffs work, that China is paying us tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. Again, tariffs are a tax on you, the American taxpayer, the American consumer. So China is not paying us anything. He says that right now they're paying 55%, which again, across the board makes no sense to do. You want targeted tariffs if you want them, but that they could potentially be paying 155% on November 1st if they don't come to some other agreement that they have no needs to come to any agreement on the rare earth elements, because again, they process 90% of all rare earth elements. So they have a virtual monopoly on this and have no reason for us to negotiate with them on that topic. A reporter brings up the fact that Australia has a trade deficit with the US instead of the other way around. So asks, why are there tariffs being put on Australia? And Trump says, well, they need a lot of airplanes because they're so remote. So that's why we have tariffs. I mean, the best he can come up with is Australia needs a bunch of airplanes. A lot of this meeting, they're going to talk about China because Trump has no idea what's going on with China, and reporters are just trying to get him to say something stupid. I have to believe at this point is what's going on. But Trump says he thinks they're going to have a strong trade deal when they come out of South Korea in a couple weeks. Trump says the tariffs have been amazing because they've helped him solve 8 wars in 8 months. He's solved 0 wars in 9 months, actually, as of today. So I don't know what he's talking about there. And then he says that 4 or 5 of them were due to tariffs. So not all of them. And then he'll say that 5 of them were due to tariffs. So he doesn't even know whether it's 4 or 5. Last week, he said 6 of them were due to tariffs. Again, he has no idea what he's talking about, probably because he solved 0 conflicts. So 0 of them can be attributed to tariffs in any way. Oh yeah, you know how last week he said that no president had ever solved a war? Now he says, I don't think there's a country in the world that has settled any wars, period. Apparently every war that ever started in the entire world is still ongoing except for the 8 that Donald Trump claims that he solved. He says Australia pays a very low tariff. They're paying 10% across the board, which is very high, especially for across the board. That's not, again, how tariffs work. For example, you would use tariffs in order to increase the production of a certain item or element or whatever in your country that's being produced in another country for a slightly lower price by raising the import cost of that, which the American consumers would then pay to make it more valuable to process or mine that element or material here in the United States. That's how a tariff works. But he says 10% that they're paying across the board is relatively low. He also says that we're the hottest country in the world, and a year and a half ago, now he can't just say a year ago because he was president 9 months ago. Now he says a year and a half ago we were dead. He says anything can happen in war, but he has no idea what's going to happen with Russia and Ukraine. He also says that Operation Midnight Hammer, and this he said before, they had been practicing 3 times a year for 22 years, and that there was never a president who allowed them to do that operation before, even though he was president for 4 years. So while he's still claiming that he solved the war in the Middle East, he's saying that Hamas is in violation of the agreement on the war that he's claiming that he settled. And he says that Hamas will be eradicated if they don't comply. Now, don't get me wrong, they've already gone and killed tens of thousands of civilians and claim them to be Hamas militants when they're not at all. They're women and children more often than not. So he's just claiming again that Israel is going to go in and kill more women and children because he said that he said this just last week, that he knows everything that Israel has done and he stands behind them 100%. In fact, so much so that he says if he asked Israel to, they'd go in 2 minutes and handle the whole deal. But he doesn't need to do that because there's 59 other countries who would all be willing to do it. He's referring to every country that supposedly signed this agreement that he says that he claims is 59 different countries, except for the United States. He says, we will put no boots on the ground because it doesn't affect us. He says that we're way ahead of China militarily in every way, except for they're building way more ships. But we're going to fix that. As he said, we're going to build 19 new naval vessels in addition to ordering 28 new B-2s. Again, this makes complete sense because he's the president of peace. He's starting no wars and he's ending every war across the world. So obviously we need to bolster our military. It only makes sense. Oh yeah, he also claims that we're way ahead of China in AI, which apparently is the most important thing. And then as part of that says that there's been $18 trillion invested in the United States and that number is going to be over 20 trillion by the end of the year. Absolutely not true. I fact checked it too many times to make it worth it doing again. He says Russia and Ukraine are losing 5,000 to 7,000 soldiers a year, but that wouldn't have happened if he had been president because this war never would have happened. He then says Australia really has a good prime minister. And then he looks at the prime minister and he says, will you agree with that statement? A reporter asks him, hey, you're the most powerful man in the world. Why don't you just enable Ukraine to end the war tomorrow? And he says to the reporter, you don't understand the situation. To which they argue, I do. And he goes, no, you don't. Regarding China again, because so much of this is going to get back to China and the rare earth elements, he says that if China doesn't stop their export controls on the rare earth elements, then they will have to pay us hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. Again, he doesn't understand tariffs. But regarding tariffs, because he thinks he understands them, he says tariffs are high on other countries based on if we like them. Russia pays a 0% tariff. He did not put tariffs on Russia, so I guess he must really like them. Trump says over an unspecified period of time that China has taken trillions of dollars from the U.S., apparently just without anyone in the U.S. knowing about it, and built their entire military with the trillions of dollars they've taken from the U.S. And then he says that putting large tariffs on China means that we don't want to do deals with them anymore. He gets every single one of his hats, all of his merchandise comes straight from China. And then he says, we're not going to allow for China to not purchase soybeans from us anymore, which again is what they did the first time that he put them in a trade war. So I don't know what he's talking about. And that's about all that he said in 35 minutes. Insane. Again, 9 Bidens in 35 minutes. For those of you who are curious, my second Patreon video will be going out today. I just finished recording it and I'm in the process of rendering it so that I can upload it to Patreon and Substack and on here for subscribers. I do ask you to please stick in there with me as I'm figuring this out. I'm doing news over there separate from Donald Trump's speeches, as well as cooking videos. I'll be going over EOs, lots of stuff. I'm still figuring it out and I'm no expert at recording. I'm no expert at script writing and I'm no expert at editing. So I'm doing my best. Stick with me as I figure it out. I promise the videos will continue to get better in the same way that they've continued to get better on here. That being said, I have people to thank. This person says, keep up the great video reports from James D and my wife, Roz Diamond, D-I-M-O-N. She's cooler than me. Check her out here, ROZDIMON.com. Enjoy from James Dawson. They sent a book, A Little Life, which people have told me is sadness porn. I didn't find it that way. I thought it was just a good book. And then Strange New World. This person says, not sure exactly how you use this, but hope it comes in handy. LOL. Love your content. What you do, I could never do, which is listening to that idiot for more than a few minutes. Thank you for sharing the highlights. From Marnie G. They sent a grill grate remover. So it's for my big green egg. And it's a hook that goes in so I don't have to touch the grate. That's how you use it. Marnie. This person says, enjoy your gift. They sent me a vinyl album of Food and Liquor by Lupe Fiasco. And then they also sent me another gift with another note. It says something to smash things with and then something to chill when you're done. Thanks to you for all you do, from Ashley J. Those were both from Ashley J. She also sent a hammer. I do some blacksmithing as well. So that's what the hammer is for. So I will smash some things and then I will listen to a good record on vinyl. Thank you guys for being here. I appreciate it so much. And like I said, the Patreon video will be out in not too long. It's still in the process of rendering. And yes, I do know that nothing that I described about what he said from the Australian Prime Minister made a whole lot of sense. It didn't make a lot of sense to me either, but I just wrote down what he said because that's all I can do here is report the news to you as I hear it.